Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Butt Crack Cycles. If you're catching me for the first time, like if this is how you're finding my channel, welcome. I'm Paul, and this is my small business. It's also my YouTube channel. And we're doing what I call a shop talk episode, where we sit down in my little building and just talk about something in old Harley land. I usually try and space these out with an episode of me working on something, turning wrenches on a bike in between the shop talk episodes, but that's just not how this one is gonna go, and that's fine. So the last episode that came out a few days ago that y'all just watched was about Harley collectors and their impact on the Harley Davidson marketplace, vintage Harley marketplace, as well as to some extent the culture of, you know, vintage Harleys that we all kind of exist in together. And I had some really good feedback on that video. I had some people leave some, you know, comments and send me some messages that have kind of inspired this video. So what I want to talk about is two things. I'm going to read you all some comments and we'll get going into it. And those two things are this. One, is the EVO the new Shovelhead, and therefore is the Shovelhead the new Panhead / Knucklehead from a value / collector standpoint? And two, what bikes, if you are looking to start a collection, should you buy right now in 2025, looking forward towards the future, using an old Harley as an investment? Say you have been priced out of the Panhead marketplace, Flathead, Knucklehead marketplace, but you could afford an EVO Big Twin or a Shovelhead. Should you buy these as an investment, and which bikes should you be looking at if you're going to do that? So that's what we're going to talk about here today. Really quick, before we get too far into this though, I just want to give a shout out to everybody. I threw these stickers up, these Butt Crack Cycles flame stickers. They're up on the web store right now, buttcrackcycles.com. 2 for $6, free shipping in the US. I did finally figure out how to do international shipping on the stickers. So if you're overseas, Canada, you know, Europe, Australia, etc., and you want a sticker, you can get them. It should work now. So yeah, thank you for everybody who's bought those. I wanted to put this in this video, not necessarily to be like, hey, go buy them, so much as I wanted to say thanks for everyone who's already bought them. I'm like over 50% of the way sold on these stickers, so they're going fast. So thanks everybody, like seriously, it really means the world when y'all support me with your money beyond just watching the videos. So thanks everybody. All right, let's get into what we're talking about. I got my phone. I'm gonna read some comments out because that's where this episode came from, was from y'all. Y'all responding to my last episode and giving me the idea for this one. So we're going to take a comment from username Killjoy357. He says, Shovelheads and EVOs are the Knuckleheads and Panheads in the modern era. The pricing matches for those, and eventually they will become unaffordable too, so buy them while you can. So that's the comment that we're going to kick things off with. I got another comment I'll read later, but there are a few other people who wrote stuff similar to that. I did a video about this to some extent, probably close to 2 years ago. I called it, Is the EVO the New Shovelhead? But I was looking at that from the perspective of, is the EVO the new Shovelhead for someone who is mostly a rider, so a guy or girl who wants to go buy a bike and go ride the thing, not really caring about does it gain or lose monetary value. And so that was a video that I did talking about, you know, I talked about some of the EVO history, I talked about the EVO improvements over the Shovelhead, what makes it so reliable, and then just talked about, you know, how they are to kind of live with and own as someone who wants to ride them. But we didn't really talk too much about the EVO as an investment platform. And I think it's kind of interesting to draw those parallels as that commenter did. Is the EVO today's generation Shovelhead? Kind of. I don't know. I say kind of because I don't know what's going to happen in the Harley collector marketplace. I can only give my opinions based on what I've seen happen over the last few years and what's happening right now. But here's what I do know. There was a really big shift in Harley culture during the EVO years, and there was a really big shift at Harley as the company in those years too. And I think these two things together have conspired to make EVOs, I don't want to say uncollectible, but I don't think that we're ever going to see EVOs really take off in value, or if they do, it's going to be a long time before they do. Let me explain. A lot of this comes down to simply production numbers. When AMF bought Harley out, these were the Shovelhead years. There are some pre-AMF shovels, and those were fairly low production bikes. Harley, up until that point in time, was not making a whole lot of bikes every year. It was like 20,000 bikes a year in early Shovelhead production, 25,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip on the numbers. I should have brought my big reference book out here that has actual year-to-year production numbers, but we're really just taking like a 30,000 foot overview of this, right? You know, we don't have to get down to brass tacks of every last little bike produced for my point to still come across. Let's just say in pre-AMF years, they were making roughly like 25,000 bikes. By the end of AMF years, they had over doubled those yearly production numbers, like really close to tripled it, if I'm remembering this correctly. The point is that the AMF shovels are significantly more plentiful than any pre-AMF Harley, which is part of why the pre-AMF Harleys are collectible, because there are so few of them. What happened with the Shovelhead production, so pre to post AMF years, ramping up significantly, that happened again in the EVO years. By the end of the 90s, Harley was making like 150,000 bikes a year. Obviously, some of them were Sportsters, so it's like total production range numbers. But the point being is that when Willie G and the shareholders bought Harley back from AMF, they had a company that had already invested a ton of money into increasing production numbers and more production facilities and more production tooling, blah, blah, blah. And AMF had already started the design and introduction of the EVO engine. And so when Willie G, etc. comes in, they've got a new motor that the public's excited about. The public's excited that, you know, they've saved them from the evil bowling ball company. And the engine was really reliable, and so you can sell all of these bikes, just churn them out, just chock full every showroom with these bikes, cut people good deals on them, get more butts on seats, and then the people are going and riding them and they're not having to come back for all this warranty work. And Harley starts to regain some of this goodwill and get rid of some of the bad tastes in the mouth that some people had about the brand as a result of the AMF years and the strikes and the layoffs and etc. And so the people who were buying Harleys changed. The company didn't want their bikes to just be for outlaws anymore. They wanted that stigma or that, you know, perspective on who rode Harleys gone. They were making bikes for Steve, the accountant, and, you know, Jim, the school teacher. Guys who were riding their stuff on the weekends and didn't want to wrench on their bikes and didn't want to be stuck on the side of the road and just wanted to go buy a motorcycle, get their little piece of Americana, get their piece of freedom machine, and go ride the thing. And Harley cashed in on this. They went full bore on this. And so you see like the hog chapters and this more like sanitized, family-friendly face of Harley and Harley culture. And how does this tie into value then? Well, obviously, if there's more bikes, there's more of them around. And I think, this is just my perspective again, and my opinion, I think that into the EVO years, there were more people buying these bikes who bought them with the intent of only riding them on the weekends, only during nice weather, never when it rains, always keeping the chrome polished and the paint rubbed and, you know, under a tarp in a climate control garage. And you see a lot of EVOs still for sale now that are in pristine factory condition with like 6,000 miles, and it'll be like a 1997. And the guy will be asking like $6,500 for the bike. Yes, I understand we all pay different prices for the same bikes across the country. Maybe a $6,500 bike here in South Carolina is an $8,000 bike where you live. The point being is that I think there's a much larger population of really baby, garage kept, not often ridden, and when they were ridden, they were gently ridden bikes of the EVO years than there were of the Shovelhead years, and especially of the pre-Shovelhead stuff. And so from that perspective, I don't know that EVOs will ever be collectible. I think a lot of you are going to disagree with me in the comments about that, and that's fine. I just look at this from like a supply and demand perspective, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm not actually about this, because right now in 2025, EVOs are just so plentiful. You can buy a $2,000 EVO project and it'll run and ride and have a clean title. It'll just be like, it needs some work. All the way up to guys asking like $7 and $8 grand for, like I said, absolutely pristine, no mileage bikes. But there's just so many of them, and so many of them were bought brand new and then just babied their entire lives, that I don't think we're ever going to see that scarcity and that rarity, which is what really drives value and demand. I do think that there will probably get to a point, maybe, where twin cam bikes and Milwaukee 8s are failing electronically, and then the EVOs are like these little dinosaurs that are still going. I say maybe on that because, like, you kind of look at cars. Like, cars got fuel injection and emissions components like way sooner than bikes did, right? And there's a lot of that stuff still going, and you can still get parts for it. And so I don't know how much I really buy into the argument that all the computers will fail, and none of that stuff will be worth anything in 10 years because all the computers will have failed. So do I think that, like, we're gonna have this mass just failure of fuel injected twin cams and Milwaukee 8s in 20 years, and then all of a sudden the EVOs are gonna skyrocket in value because everyone wants a simple motorcycle with a carburetor on it? I don't know. People like to fantasize about stuff like that. I think the reality of it, or at least from my perspective, is that I think EVOs will be a good buy for a long time for the person who's looking for a bike that's simple enough they can maintain it themselves in a small shop like this. This is a 12 by 20 lawn and garden shed, right? A at-home garage shop with not having to have a huge amount of tools or specialty equipment or scanners or software or know how to use it. A simple voltmeter, a good set of ratchets and sockets and wrenches and stuff, screwdrivers, and a shop manual, and like you're in business on an EVO, especially if it's carbureted. And so I think that's where those bikes are going to stay for quite a while. If you want to buy like a really super low mileage EVO that's pristine in the hopes that it appreciates, go for it. I don't think you're going to lose money on it. I could be wrong, but I don't think you will. And maybe you might end up with something that's worth a whole lot more than when you originally started, but I don't think that the EVO bikes are going to have this huge skyrocket in value like, say, Panheads and Knuckleheads did. And again, my reason for this is production numbers and the people who bought them means that we still now, 30 years later since, EVO production, we still have a really large population of those bikes still on the road, still in really good shape, still being bought and sold and ridden every single day. And they just haven't gotten scarce enough yet. And I don't know that they ever will. They're kind of cockroaches. They're hard to kill. That might actually be part of why there's so few Knuckleheads, Panheads, and that kind of stuff left, because objectively they weren't as good of bikes, so they started with limited production numbers, and then a lot of them just got turned into scrap. They were just rode hard and put away wet. And for so long, those bikes were just old bikes. They were just cheap, crappy old Harleys, and no one really cared about them. If you wrecked it and rolled it off a cliff and caught it on fire and then pissed on it drunk at the bar to get the fire to go out, like, nobody cared. It was just an old bike for so many years. And that hasn't happened with the EVO bikes, at least not from my perspective. Which brings us then to our other question, or the other response that I'm going to read out here. This comes from a guy named Greg. He messaged me on Instagram, and he says, for all of us who can't afford the current collector bikes, what bikes should we be buying now for 10 to 20 years down the pike? Will certain models be more desirable than others? Should they be all original? Well, I think I've kind of covered this a little in my rambling that I've already done here. I think that the Shovelhead is the bike that's going to appreciate and value more than the EVO. Again, like I talked about, I don't think the shovels are ever going to be as collectible or as desirable or as rare as the pre-shovel stuff or pre-AMF stuff. Generator shovels being the one exclusion here. They're already expensive. Generator shovels are essentially panhead priced already. Not quite, they're like 80% of the panhead price, whereas cone shovels are like 25 or 30% of panhead pricing. And so I think if you're looking for a bike to buy that you want to invest in and you want something that's gonna gain some value, look at something like that sort of reddish white FL, that 70 FL. First year of cone shovel production that we did on this channel. And that's a bike that's clean, nice. It's not a factory paint job, but it's a really good paint job. If you want a bike like that, especially with an original paint job still on it, that's a bike that today maybe you spend no more than $10,000 on. $8,000 maybe. Let's throw a number out there. And that's something that I think that in the next 10 to 15 years is gonna appreciate and it's going to gain value. It's not going to gain value perhaps in the way that if you had bought a panhead in 2000 and hung on to it for 25 years, it probably won't appreciate that much, but it is gonna appreciate more than, say, my Shovelhead. My Shovelhead's just a Frankenstein bike of like a whole bunch of just crap all rolled together. And I think that a bike like that is going to appreciate more than an EVO bike will for all the reasons that I stated beforehand. So for my money, if you're looking to try and buy something now in the hopes that it gains some value in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever, my money for like the regular working class folks, people like us who can't buy panheads and can't buy knuckleheads, can't buy flatheads, my money is on as original as possible of a cone shovel as you can get. And I think that's a bike that's still obtainable on a working person's salary. You can still go ride it and enjoy it sometimes, and I think it will appreciate in value. Maybe pick number 2 on this is then, I guess if you want to buy an EVO for collectible purposes, maybe like a Springer Softail or a Fat Boy, because those were a little bit more limited production runs. FXRs also. The hipster crowd has kind of got a hold of FXRs and artificially inflated the value of those bikes. A lot of FXR guys are trying to Dynabro them, where they're trying to make them like twin cam dynas, and they're putting all the thrashing supply and the, you know, Canyon Carver stuff on them. So again, a pretty nice FXR in mostly factory condition, especially a Shovelhead FXR, 82, 83. That's a bike that I think will gain some value and be collectible. It's a little bit different. It's a little lower production, but it's kind of like a cult classic, even in EVO form. So maybe my short list here for collecting is cone shovel in all original condition, FXRs, and then like small production EVO bikes, Springer Softails, and like Fat Boys. I don't know. y'all tell me. I always like getting your opinions and your feedback. Obviously, I sit here and read the stuff. Like, I really do try and read every comment. I miss a bunch of them. I get like over 1,000. It's more like 1,200 plus comments a month on YouTube. Plus what people DM me on Instagram, and people email me at the info@buckcrackcycles.com. But I do try and read and respond to everything that you say, and listen to what y'all have to say and learn from it and use it as inspiration. And I think it's fun. Like, that's cool. Like, we're all in this together, and it's fun to talk about this stuff together. So I think that's really it. Last thing, because someone's gonna bring it up. Yes, I'm sitting in front of a panhead. This is my panhead. If you watch this channel enough, you know that this was my uncle's bike for over 50 years, and I've inherited it. I couldn't own a panhead if that wasn't the case. So before you go off about some trust fund hipster who has a really expensive bike telling us what working class people should buy, I couldn't afford to own my own bike. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all on the next episode. Thanks again. Seriously, big shout out everybody who's bought a sticker. Man, like, y'all made my Thanksgiving weekend with that. My web store went crazy. It's just notification after notification on the stickers, and a lot of people were buying shirts, I guess because they were on there buying stickers and wanted a shirt too. So thanks for everybody who did that, and yeah, that means the world to me. All right, y'all be good.